So with all those new weapons and new ways of fighting, eventually the war is going to sort of start coming to an end. Again, I'm not sure if I mentioned this last time. The war was only supposed to last about 6 weeks. They said with the amount of countries and the amount of people, the amount of army that is fighting in the war, we expect this only to last about 6 weeks. People will be done, and the issue will be resolved. It lasts for over 4 years. Okay. Again, with that brutal fighting, with the large killing machine guns, mustard gas, and that idea of trench warfare, where it's extremely deadly to try to advance. Okay. So eventually, the end of the war is going to come, but the beginning of another war is going to happen. And we'll talk about why that is in just a few minutes. So, in January of 1917, this is where your notes start on the second page of those notes. We have the Zimmermann telegram. And essentially what you need to know about the Zimmermann telegram is that it was this fake telegram or real telegram. Oh, what is a telegram, by the way? It's kind of like a letter. Yeah. It involved Mexico and essentially called the Americans out for not being in the war. And eventually, like I said, in 1917, the Americans are going to join the war. But the Zimmermann telegram comes out. Then, in February of that same year, Germany, using those U-boats, I showed you those submarine things that they had, they declare unrestricted submarine warfare. Now, what does it mean to be unrestricted? You can do it. Is anything stopping you? No. There are no rules. It doesn't matter. We are going to shoot and kill anything that we see as a danger to us. That's what the Germans are saying. Unrestricted submarine warfare. That means any British ship, any United States ship, any ship that we see in the water that's in our territory is going down. You think people like that? No. Very dangerous. Very dangerous to be having ships in the water. We've talked a little bit about Russia, and we will talk about them more on Thursday. But at the time, Russia was going through its own problem. Now, remember, 1917, this is 3 years into the war. Russia's been fighting all along. Remember, they're friends with Serbia, who's friends with Great Britain, who's friends with France. Again, they're all on the same side. Their Tsar, which is kind of like their king, is under a lot of fire. Russia had not industrialized. They had not made all those factories and things like that we had talked about a couple units ago. So they're very behind the times. They're living in the 1800s still, even though it's the 1900s, if that makes sense to you. So their government is under a lot of pressure from their people because the poor are extremely, extremely poor. The rich are extremely rich, and people are unhappy. Kind of like what happened in France with everybody being so angry during the French Revolution is what's happening in Russia. So the Tsar, Nicholas II of Russia, gives up his throne. He steps down. Abdicates. It's just a big word for stepping down. He gives up rule. And a provisional government is declared. Now, what does it mean to be provisional? Temporary, part-time, right? It's only supposed to bridge the gap until something better comes along. Okay, very good. So new government is declared in Russia. We're going to get there, like I said, a little bit more in detail a little bit later today and on Thursday. In April, so a month later, Woodrow Wilson, the President of the United States, asks Congress for a declaration of war on Germany. Now, why does he do that? Well, he needs Congress's approval in order to declare war. But it goes back to this idea that Germany declares unrestricted submarine warfare. And write this down next to this thing here. That says Lusitania. Lusitania. And that is an American ship with American seamen, not like that, you know, like people who work on the sea. And yeah, like that. And it gets blown up. It gets blown up. Now there is debate whether or not the ship was blown up by the Germans, or some people say that the Americans did that on purpose to have an excuse to get into the war. Okay. Most likely it gets blown up by a German U-boat, but it's possible that the Americans did this to have an excuse to get into war.
You think so?
I think it was the Germans who did it. I don't think the Americans would do that. However, it's possible. It's very possible. And sometimes, maybe, yeah. It's probably better not knowing. You're right. Well, that's up for debate. You're right. But anyway, the Americans asked to become in the war. Like I said, Russia leaves the war, and America enters the war. All right? So, the United States enters World War I. Russia comes out. February of 1917, they're running out of food, they're running out of supplies in Russia. People are angry. Remember I told you the Russians are crazy, they'll fight under any circumstances. Well, they turn their fighting to their own country instead. Instead of fighting the war, they fight their own country. Tsar Nicholas steps down, and a revolution occurs. Now, what's a revolution again? We talk about it all the time. A change, but is more than just a change. It usually involves something. Yeah, people are rebelling against their own country or something else. In this case, it's their own country. And a man by the name of Vladimir Lenin, V.I. Lenin, takes over. Now, Vladimir Lenin subscribes to this idea that was made by a man by the name of Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. And that idea is communism. Now, communism is an economic theory. We acted out communism in this classroom. Remember when we did the rock, paper, scissors thing? Right? You had money and you won money and you lost money and things like that. Well, communism is the one where if you lost money, no, you could come to me, the government, and get money back. Because what is supposed to happen in communism is everything that is made in the entire country is given to the government and then shared equally amongst its people. However, is there any incentive to work in communism? If a doctor makes the same amount of money as a garbage man, what is the incentive to be a doctor? There is none, right? What if I gave you an assignment and told you you had to do the assignment, but no matter what, everybody in the class was going to get a 60%? Would you do it? Why not?
There's no incentive.
Then there's no incentive to do it. You're going to get a 60 no matter what, so why do it? Right? Now, a couple of you might do it, right? I would have done it. Hello. Of course.
Sorry for it.
No problem. I see you. So there are going to be some of you, and probably me, because I'm a big nerd in school, still am, that might do the work. But most of you probably wouldn't. That's exactly what communism is. So in theory it works. It's nice because everything is shared. It's all equal. But it crumbles. However, it works for a while anyway. And it's still debating works in China at least a little bit anyway. So, yeah, China's technically a communist country. However, they don't have full communist policies. So it's not really true communism. Okay, so let's talk about the United States a little bit. We don't get to do it that often, so let's do it now. Woodrow Wilson is the president at the time. He was voted in 1912. He was president from 1912 to 1916. In 1916, he runs for president again. And he runs on the slogan that, hey, he kept us out of the war. Let's get him back in. There's this whole messy stuff that's going on in Europe. But this guy, he kept us out of the war. He gets voted back in. He's happy, right? There's war in Europe. There's peace in America, right? He kept us out of the war. Cool guy, right? Yeah. What's eventually going to happen is, I'm sorry, I'm going to go back. He gets us into the war. Again, because of that sinking of the Lusitania, that ship with American people on it. He gets us in, again, with Congress's approval, whatnot. But he gets us into the war. So America enters. They send lots of troops over. And eventually, they are going to end up on the winning side of the war. In January of 1918, the war is coming to an end. It is evident that the Allied powers, Great Britain, France, the United States, are going to win the war. So Woodrow Wilson makes this declaration. They're called the 14 points. Okay, that is big. Underline or circle that in your notes. Okay, the 14 points. And what he says is if you follow these 14 points at the end of the war, we will have world peace. We will no longer go into this world war ever again. So the 14 points, and this is all Woodrow Wilson. Wilson's 14 points, you'll see it. And oftentimes shows up on the SOL. Okay, skipping ahead to August, we have the last major battle of World War I, where the German army finally retreats, and the end is near. November 9th of that same year, Kaiser Wilhelm II is going to abdicate. Now, we talked about what this big word means. What does it mean? Step down, right? So Kaiser Wilhelm, he is the king of what country? Not Prussia, but Germany, yes? And he steps down. Thus, ending the war. November 10th of that year, Germany is no longer allowed to have a king. A new government is formed in Germany called the Republic. We'll get to that in a second. It's actually how Adolf Hitler gets his power, is with this new republic. But we'll get there again. And then, one of the biggest mistakes in history, and one of the most ironic things in history, is done. And that is, on November 11th, at 11 o'clock, the armistice, or the treaty, is signed. Now, it was no coincidence that this time was chosen. It was supposed to be ironic. It was supposed to go down in history as the day that the world was going to be at peace for the rest of eternity. However, we know that that's not true. Okay? And actually, I'm going to give you a little foreshadowing, a cool little piece of history is... No, I won't. I'll wait for it. Alright, so the war ends in November of 1918, lasting for over 4 years. Millions of soldiers all around the world die in what is the greatest casualty war to this point. All right. So now the war is over, and the world leaders don't want this to ever happen again. They want world peace, and they want it to continue through eternity, right? They don't want millions of men. At this time, only men were allowed in the army. They don't want millions of men to die for essentially nothing, right? This was all just a little fight that turned into a huge thing because of alliances, because of nationalism, because of militarism. These things happen. So they come together at a peace conference. Who are they? The big three plus this other guy. We'll talk about that in a second. So Woodrow Wilson, he represents the United States. We have George Clemenceau, who represents France. And we have David George, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, or Great Britain. But wait a minute. What do you notice about those countries that are represented there? The United States, France, and the United Kingdom. Who's not there? Germany, Turkey, Russia, right? You don't have like an entire other side of the war. You just have all friends, right? And then Italy, oddly enough, Italy is supposed to represent the Central Powers. Okay? Funny because they don't really play a role in the war at all. So you have all these friends sitting around the table. Oh yes, we want peace. We want all this stuff. It's great. It's dandy. We're going to hold peace. It's going to last forever. But if you don't invite the losers, how is that fair? Right? So Russia, Germany, and all of the Central Powers are missing from the peace conference. One of the main reasons that we were in war is because of Germany in the first place. So why aren't they invited? Up to debate. So the idea of the entire meeting was this idea of self-determination. Now that's just a big word for what? You can tell me what that means. Well, what does self mean? Like me or we, right? And determination. Now it has a couple of different meanings. Let's see if I can grab it out of you. What does the word determination mean? You're determined, right, to do something.
You put your mind up to it.
You put your mind up to it. What did you say it was? You focus on something. Okay? In this case, it means that we are going to choose our government. So we're going to choose how we want to be ruled. We are going to choose who rules us. We are going to choose everything. So self-determination is giving back to those people who got it taken from them. Okay? But only in certain cases. And we'll talk about that in just a moment.
Do we write self-determination or do we write self-determination?
You can write self-determination. So then you can write below it, we choose our own government. We choose our own government. So, whoops. That's okay. So the Treaty of Versailles, 1919 is signed. But here's the thing. Who's going to make up the treaty? Who makes up the treaty? Or who do you think is going to make up the treaty? Who can guess? All right, so we got the United States, yes? Who else? The Allies, in general, right? So we're going to have the United States. We're going to have France. We're going to have Great Britain writing this. Is that fair? It's supposed to be a peace treaty. If you don't involve the other people, it's going to be problematic. I'm going to tell you right now. So Britain and France, they don't want, remember what we said, Woodrow Wilson's 14 points. And those 14 points, again, were supposed to do what? Bring peace, bring world peace. So the 14 points, supposed to bring world peace. Britain says, no, there's something else we got to do first. What Great Britain and France want to do is they want to strip Germany of its war-making policy and power. So what they say in the Treaty of Versailles is that Germany, you can only have 100,000 soldiers. Now, at the beginning of World War I, they say, you're only allowed to have 100,000 soldiers. This is 1918. But in 1914, guess how many soldiers Germany had? I'll tell you. 5.5 million. That's 10, 50. So they're saying you have to decrease your military by 55 times. 55 times the amount, right? I don't know what kind of percent that is. I'm no mathematician. But that's a whole lot. They're basically telling them, if you had 20 soldiers, you're only allowed to have one. Okay? It's a big thing. But they're saying it's because of you, Germany, we went to war. They are blaming Germany for the entire war. Now, granted, Germany had a big part in it. But when you blame somebody solely for something, is it fair? Do those people like it? No. Okay? Everything that Germany had taken over to that point, including in Africa, were taken away from them. Like I said, their military was restricted. They were not allowed to have a big army anymore. And in order for Germany to be able to be their own country again, they had to sign this treaty, and Article 231 says that Germany was the sole reason for the entire war. They are supposed to admit guilt to the entire war. So a war that involved 7 major countries in the entire world was put on the back of one, and that is Germany. Now, not only did they have to admit guilt to the war, but they are going to have to pay for the entire war as well. Yes. They're going to have to pay for the entire thing as well, in what's called reparations. They have to pay the war reparations to repair the country to repair all of the soldiers' damage that happened. It's this astronomical figure that I'll show you in just a second. So reparation, do you have to go they're there for you. So reparations, again, is to compensate for war. Except when you destroy countries, and when you have to pay your soldiers, how much money is that? It's a whole lot of money. And when you're doing it for one country, it's a whole lot of money. When you're doing it for 7 countries, it's impossible. It's impossible. So here's sort of what happens. Germany loses all of its colonies. Denmark is given a little bit more land. Poland was given its own country for, again, Poland is sort of this country who always goes back and forth between being a country and being taken over. Poland is actually where World War II is going to start. We'll get there later. A new government in Germany is created called the Weimar Republic. Again, one of the reasons that Adolf Hitler comes into power. We'll get to that in a second. This piece of land next to France is given to France. This very rich area of natural resources called Alsace and Lorraine is given to France. Germany is forbidden to unite with Austria. Remember, Austria is big friends with Germany. Okay, they're sort of alike in a lot of ways. They're not allowed to be there either. Czechoslovakia, that was tough, is also given its own independence, its own self-determination. Okay? So Germany shrinks its size by about 50%. Okay? So 50% of their entire country is given up. All right. Then, this will be the last thing that we do today. It's called the mandate system. So the mandate system is where a country or a zone of a country is ruled by an outside figure or an outside land. It's like the colony system in Africa. So these territories are placed under administration of European powers. So, the Ottoman Empire is broken up into many different countries. Turkey being one of those countries, but also countries such as Iraq and Jordan. Okay, parts of Saudi Arabia are created as well, and Palestine. Now, Palestine or Israel, okay, depending, it's the same place, has always been fought over by 3 different religions. What 3 religions would that be? Christianity, Islam, and Judaism, right? This is the Holy Land for all 3 of those religions, okay? It will continue to be fought over until this day. And I'm guessing, I'm predicting that it will continue to be fought over for probably the rest of our lives, for sure, and much into the future. All right, so Africa is again split up between the different countries. Arabia, or was called the Ottoman Empire, is split up as well. Okay, but we got to. So this idea that peace was built on quicksand. Now, what is quicksand? Who can tell me what that is? Sand that you sink into, and when you try to get yourself out by flailing around, what happens? You sink faster. Okay? That's exactly what's going to happen, because the United States they help make the Treaty of Versailles, but then they reject it. They don't even sign it because it doesn't have the 14 points. So Woodrow Wilson and Congress says, hell no, we're not signing that. Plus, they say You can't do that to a country. You can't make them pay for everything. You can't blame them for everything. And that was Germany that was blamed for everything, right? You can't do that. So we're not signing it. Okay? So we never signed the Treaty of Versailles. Then this thing was created called the League of Nations. Now what does that sound like? The League of Nations. What's a league? Like National Football League. What is that? Well, teams or organizations join together under something to do something, right? Well, the League of Nations was set out to sort of be like a force to ensure that there was never a war again. However, it fails miserably. We have the United Nations today. Anybody ever heard of the United Nations? Yes?
Yeah.
The League of Nations is the precursor to the United Nations, except the League of Nations, and we're going to learn this in World War II, the League of Nations has no power. It's there to say, hey, don't do that, but it doesn't have any military power to back it up. So they say, hey, don't do that, and then when you do it, they say, all right, but you better not do it again, right? So there's no power behind it at all. But the United States doesn't even join the League of Nations. They're like, you know what? Screw this. Europe, we're not dealing with you again. It's not worth it. Then there's Germany. Poor little old Germany. They are extremely bitter, and they hate the Allies. They hate Great Britain. They hate France. They hate the United States because they made them sign the Treaty of Versailles, admitting guilt for the entire war and going into extreme debt because they had to pay for it. Asia and Africa are pissed because they're still not independent because of the mandate system, right? That thing that we just talked about where other nations would control you. And then the League of Nations was ineffective. The League of Nations is going to be ineffective. They have no power. They have no power.